Right then, welcome to another episode of the Astrakhan's Feather. This is episode 12. I actually got it wrong the other day. I'd done more episodes than I thought. So this is episode 12. We're doing it in the afternoon this time, and it's very stormy outside. So yes, I think it's quite appropriate for the subject matter. Anyway, so just a quick recap. People have died. Young girl and Ray Lucas, local colourful identity, as they say. And we last left it with Cooper Blackwelder. No, we didn't. With Trevor Aisbett, who's the mayor, actually, speaking about Armand and how he went missing. And Armand is the father of local reporter Holly Dreyfus. Anyway, here we go. So there was that. Now, Christ, he's back home at the moment. He's walking up the lighthouse steps from the garage. He's dropped the boys off at school. He hears Jenny singing softly. His heart thumps. A board creaks under his foot and there's sudden silence. He hates the silence the most. He can feel her in the house, sense her, smell her perfume body, taste her in the air after a shower, before bed, in the middle of the night, in the morning, warm and cuddly. It's worse when the boys are at school. No anchor, nothing to fill the space. That silence so loud is like a sound. He often has a crazy desire to go and climb fast, hand over hand like a gorilla, and sit outside up on the steep-pitched tin roof next to the steel chimney, hang on to it like a drowning man. He doesn't do that, of course, but he's close. Christ walks into the lounge. He expects to see Jenny there. Half expects, I suppose. Lounging, ankles crossed, reading a magazine, tilting her head towards him for a peck, amused smile on her lips. He expects her to say, "Hey, Christ, look at this. Unbelievable," because she always has something to show him. He puts a kettle on. As it makes noise, he looks out at the garden where the heat monster is forcing shrubs and flowers to bend down to its will. Jenny loved the heat, the sun. He pours water in the teapot, the dry leaves crackle. Darjeeling Earl Grey mix, pinch of Lapsang Souchong. Been the same since he was 17. He grunts. Some things never change. It's true. That's how I've often had my tea. Don't so much these days. In Australia, Lapsang Souchong, not that easy to come by. Sorry, this microphone's getting a bit wobbly. Anyway, Christ breathes deeply and looks at nothing. And some things did change, that's for sure. Sipping the smoky tea, he steps out on the deck, pulling the sliding screen door closed behind him. He hadn't meant to go to Victoria's house. He didn't even know her. But when Cooper Blackwelder told him about Ray Lucas's death, he knew she'd need someone who understood. Victoria had been gazing out the kitchen window, the chateau silent around her. If you were filming the house, as a TV crew once did, you would start in the doorway with the cathedral-height double doors leading from the dark wood-floored lounge with its comfortable chairs and sofas, Persian rugs, a tick-tocking antique French grand-père clock, and big old sandstone fireplace topped with a family portrait taken by a society photographer from the city. There was smiles, perfect skin tones, laughter and joy. The snapper hadn't even thought about Photoshop. You track your TV camera to show a shot through the massive kitchen with its beautiful sun-splashed green white veined marble work surfaces. The camera moves along, lingers on the German kitchen appliances built solid as the gold badge Mercedes-Benz S-Class, which normally sits just outside under the ornate iron filigreed carport, but which on this morning is missing. She nibbles a finger and wonders. Down at the far end of the kitchen, a set of glass double doors open on a shady and very private courtyard, laid with soft butterscotch sandstone, small ornate fountain, iron table and chairs. The water tumbling from a cherub's hand sounds like Vivaldi. He's a composer. Sometimes Victoria will sit out here on breezy days under the softly undulating damask shade cloth, sipping water from a handmade glass with a double winding stem that signifies love and is part of a one-off set, a wedding present from Ray. This is true. I have that set of glasses. I actually have one here to show you. I was going down to Cornwall with a girlfriend, right? Many years ago. I was in my late 20s, I reckon. It's almost 2 centuries ago. No, not quite. Stopped at this place. I can't remember the whole thing really, but I stopped at this place. It was like a shed somewhere out in the country, and there was this young bloke there. He would have been about the same age as me, and he was doing glass blowing, right? And he made this set of 6 glasses, wine glasses. Each one was different. But what was the same about them was that instead of being one stem, there were two stems that curved around each other. They didn't touch each other, right? I still got them at home. Not one of them, touch wood, has been broken. So those things would be, they're over 40 years old. I don't drink a lot of wine. I went through a period when I had a fair bit of wine, but don't drink a lot. But thinking about it now, I might have one when I get back home. Incidentally, I am going back home soon. I've chucked this job in after 3 months. Don't like it. Don't mind the place, but don't like the people. There's no business plan. It's going nowhere except downhill like a truck with no brakes. So anyway, I'm going back home to the Hawkesbury. More about that later. Anyway, sorry for the interruption. Look upon it as, the sort of thing you get when an ad comes on. Okay. Meanwhile, back to the story. The water tumbling from a cherub's hand sounds like Vivaldi. Sometimes Victoria will sit out here on breezy days, as she does, with that glass, as a wedding present from Ray. She pours water from a green-tinted carafe of finest Venetian-cut crystal. She likes the clink and crackle of the polar bear-shaped ice cubes. The TV camera would then pass through the private courtyard and arrive and feast on the oh-so-blue swimming pool, fringed with tall palm trees rustling softly in the breeze. The azure pool is a shape someone has taken time to think about and then sketch. It has softly sloping sides. There is nothing to climb up out of. You emerge like a nymph. You don't even need to have Victoria's fluid movements, perfect figure, those coltish legs to look good, though it helps, obviously. The camera moves sideways, slowly lifts into the air, higher and higher, drawing back, and now the house, Victoria's secret, is shown in all its glory. Well, almost all. It is far too generously proportioned to fit comfortably into any one camera lens, unless you use a chopper and fly very high indeed. On the ground floor, French windows open from the wide internal hallway into guest rooms, of which there are just 5. All different, all well appointed, each with a spa bath, massive walk-in power showers and separate dressing rooms. The people who come to stay at Victoria's Secret are guests, not friends. They say you can't put a price on peace and quiet, but at Victoria's it works out at $1,500 a night. The top floor is where the family lives. Victoria, husband Ray, the much-loved children, twins Sam and Sandy, aged 7 and both as beautiful as their mother. But Victoria is not just about good looks. She has written a book on cooking. You can buy it everywhere. When there are guests, Victoria cooks them a different breakfast every day. This is true too. I have stayed at this place. This is where this comes from. When there are guests, Victoria cooks them a different breakfast every day. If you are lucky and wealthy enough to be there for a week, that's 7 different meals each morning. It was fantastic. It's details like this, the surprising breakfast, the silent children, that make staying at Victoria's Secret a divine pleasure. Ray and Victoria also own a restaurant and food business in the city. Ray has a very successful commercial property company. He dabbles in many other ventures, most of which Victoria has no desire to know about. Having come from the dark side herself, she knows when to avert her eyes and keep her mouth shut. But on this afternoon, the house happens to be empty, the children at school, and Victoria hears the heavy crunch of a vehicle on the perfectly raked gold nuggets. A man gets out of a silent silver car and walks towards the house. Victoria does a double take, squints into the sunlight, slowly smiles, and then laughs like a girl, because for a moment she could have sworn it was George Clooney about to knock on her door. Meanwhile, Holly Dreyfus, walking slowly, head down, is thinking about her father. But the air is so humidity thick, her brain feels muddled. The rising heat sits heavily on the village, and it's doing her brain in. As she passes the vehicle entrance to Bone Mountain Police Station, she hears a scuffle. Terry Preston, a wild, almost deranged look on his face, has been dragged by his hair across the police station car park by a large, beefy, red-faced police officer with full-sleeve tats. Holly sees a livid bruise under one of Preston's eyes. Cooper Blackwelder doing the hauling. At school, Holly was a year above him. Blackwelder was a dumb bully. He'd never grown out of it. She shakes her head, picks up speed, walks quickly to the front entrance, bursts through, rattling the glass. I was going to ask if you found my dad yet, she says to Sergeant Bob Mullins, who is leaning on his side of the counter reading the latest record, all crisp and still smelling of Alkibir black printer's ink. But instead, she says, I'm going to ask why a man, Terry Preston as it happens, is been dragged across your yard by his hair by one of your police officers, and why he has a fresh bruise under one eye. Mullins curses to himself. But Blackwelder is a problem that keeps on giving. Miss, I assure you all our officers are fully trained in correct procedures. Like fuck they are, Sergeant. Mullins' jaw drops. What's going on, Sergeant? Ollie turns to find Karen Allen has materialised beside her, as she has a habit of doing. She gives her a grin. Karen and her stony face ignore her. Miss Dreyfus here was inquiring about her father. I'm sure, but what is this about Mr. Preston? Mr. Preston? Karen smiles at her sergeant bleakly. Mr. Innocent until proven guilty Preston, that one. Mullin pulls himself up to his full height, chest puffed out. In for questioning, miss. Right, well, I'll be seeing him in a minute then. Now, Miss Dreyfus, we said we'd have a coffee. Meet me at Sassafras in 10. You are a bag of shit, says Cooper Blackwelder, his florid face an inch from the bruises on Billy Preston's. Preston looks at Coop with dead eyes. Coop Blackwelder swivels his head and glares at Benny with a madman's stare. Leave this to me. You're going to get us both in trouble. Listen to him, says Preston. Coop slowly turns back to Preston, whose eyes are wide, livid, a pulse working in his left temple like a worm. You dumb fuck. Think you can talk to an officer of the law like that? You fucking think again. He slaps Preston so hard across his face, blood flows from a split lip. He goes to slap his head back the other way, but a hand catches his wrist and locks it mid-flight. Is it always this hot, says Karen Allen. This is nothing, says Bob Mullins, as Karen fans herself with a day report. Karen considers her sergeant for a moment. I'll bet. Now, I want him off the force. Thunder rolls and rumbles, and soon rain will drum the tin roof again. Bob Mullins' headache thuds. He massages the back of his neck, slowly rolls his head. I'm just going to change something here. Just bear with me. I won't bother telling you what it is. Whoops. Got it. Okay. He says, Miss, I don't think that's a good idea. Karen gets up out of the chair, suddenly looming up over Mullins, sitting the other side of the desk. He stares at her with startled eyes, and she realises for the first time he's old. He closes his eyes for a second or two, then opens them and smiles kindly. Please sit. She obeys. Look, he takes a deep breath, leans forward, hands on the table. Let me tell you how it is here. He stops. I'm just going to move back a bit here because that's a bit uncomfortable holding this the way I've been doing it. Okay. Perhaps he wonders whether it's a good idea to tell the Pom, but then he takes a breath and begins. Everyone knows everyone. You have to understand that. The links between people run back and they're tangled. They're like the roots of a tree. You can't see them, but they're there and run deep. Karen says, "You going all zen on me, Sarge?" Mullins laughs throatily. Truth is, you'll never be long. And if you have any kids someday, neither will your kids. Or some of the mums will be pleasant enough around school, but you'll never get invited to their houses, even though you'll see them all together in cafes as you drive on by. Their young ones will play together because that's the way it's always been. The parents, they all went to school in lockstep, right from kindy up, as did their parents and their parents before them, and so on, back and back. They know each other intimately. Their histories, the good and the bad. Somewhere along the track, these folks will have intermarried. Scratch the surface, you'll find some of them each of their brothers or sisters, no doubt. Cousins, that's normal. They have one set of kids when they're still at school, usually no more than 16 years old when they start breeding. Nothing much else to do here, and nobody thinks about leaving. They think it's God's own up here, though they know nothing else. Then they get to mid-30s, sometimes 40s. They decide to have more kids. But then the kids that are born 20 years ago got their own offspring. This is true. So more often than not, there are two kids in the same class, same age, but one is an aunt or uncle. It's absolutely true. It happens all the time. Karen says, "You're kidding." No, miss, I'm not. My point being, things here in the country are rarely what they seem. Always worth bearing that in mind. Those ties run deep. Doesn't matter what you do, what you say, how sweetly you smile, how many favours you do, somewhere, whether you man the school canteen, make money for them at spring fair, you'll never truly belong. My advice, don't bother wasting your time trying. All the time, Mullins is thinking she's not going to stick it out. Karen leans back, rocking a chair on its hind legs, considering. You realise Sarge, you've missed your true vocation. That job at the local tourism board. Mullins barks a short laugh. You're funny, miss, I'll give you that. Oh, she says snarkily, letting the chair legs down with a clack. Arms crossed on the desk. You think that will help, the humour thing? Mullins eyes her closely. They have their own sense of humour. Of course they do, says Karen. She lets a moment of silence go by. All very interesting, but the point is Blackwelder is a liability. Look, says Bob, thing is, someone needs something, a neighbour tries to help you get it. And that one day that... I'll read this again, I messed it up. Look, thing is, someone needs something, a neighbour tries to help you get it. And one day that person could be Blackwelder. He shrugs. Maybe something bad happens. Let's say you fall off your ladder. As you do, says Karen. Yeah, well, just an example. Okay, let's imagine you've lived here for a while and even got married to a local. Karen raises both eyebrows. Maybe even had some children. Mullins grunted, maybe. Oh, yeah, and they'll say stuff like water, pasta, computer, and call the colour maroon. Mullins fills his cheeks with air. Yes, well, maybe they will. Maybe they'll do all that. Look, point is, you get married, you have the nippers who use words like pasta, because they put an R in pasta, right? Water is water, right? Computer. All right. And the funniest one, which I've mentioned here, is the colour maroon, right? Which is maroon, right? We know it everywhere else in the world as maroon, right? Because it's spelled M-A-R-O-O-N, maroon. But here they call it maroon. Nobody knows why. I have no idea why. Really don't know. Met a woman the other day whose surname is Mahoney, right? Irish name. But she calls herself Marnie. Then she told me she'd been to Ireland to look for relatives. I said, well, what do the relatives call themselves over there? She says, Mahoney. I says, okay, that's right. Why'd you call yourselves Marnie? And I'm thinking, I know already. It's because it's easier, right? Because nobody can pronounce Mahoney. They don't know how to go about it. Anyway, let's continue. There's another little interlude. Okay, Mullins says, anyway, you break a leg falling, well then, some folks, off your ladder, right? Some folks, maybe even many people, may come and visit. They'll quietly finish that house painting you started up on your ladder. They won't wait till be asked. They'll just do it. True. They won't say much, don't want thanks, but you know what? You'll be grateful. He shrugs his shoulders. Of course you will, and why not? Karen says, and then when someone who helped you wants help, you'll be there for them. Aye. I read about that somewhere. She touches a finger to her lips, frowns, gazes into space. Oh, yes, I remember the Mafia. They work like that. Mullins stiffens, gets up, hands moving deep in his trouser pockets, and turns side on to Acting Inspector Karen Allen. He looks out the window, rocks on his feet, doesn't notice the view. He turns his head a touch, looking at her out the tail of his eye. She looks like someone's pretty daughter, hands demurely crossed in her lap. She gazes at him seriously, eyes big. I know what you think about Constable Blackwelder, he says, and you're probably right, miss. Don't much like him myself, to be honest. Don't think he's a good cop, but his family's been on the mountain since the early days. Be about 4th or 5th generation. Doesn't make it right, says Karen. He's not royalty. Ha, far from it. We have standards, she says. Yeah, we do, you're right, but sometimes it's how we interpret those standards. Karen stands up, shaking her head. Not the way I do the job, Sarge. I've got to tell you, came out here to police, not get on with the neighbours, no matter how long they've been here. I'm going to put Blackwelder on report. What that means is, I know what it means, miss, but if you do that, you're going to find Cooper Blackwelder's not very helpful from here on. Karen laughs. Oh, my God. From here on, you mean it could get worse? You crack me up. I'm going to see Mr. Preston, see what his story is, try to persuade him not to bring a case against the police. Billy Preston, says the Sarge. He won't do that. No, well, I suppose not, says Karen. Wouldn't want to find himself beaten up in a dark alley swallowing his own blood and vomit now, would he? There's a right way to do things, Bob, and that's what I do. She breezes out the door. For a second or two, the Sarge wished he still smoked Capstan full strength. All right, I'm going to leave it there because we've got 19 minutes, which is reasonably lengthy. I know some of these bits are... There's a lot of description and all that, exposition, as they call it in the movies these days, don't they? Where they like to cut out that sort of stuff. But I just think it builds a picture, that's all. Anyway, there we go. And, look, if you want a copy of the Astrakhan's Feather so you can get to the end before I do, or reading it, then get in touch with me and message me, and yeah, we can sort that out. Alrighty, enjoy your evening, afternoon, or morning, whatever you're doing in the world. Take care, and we'll talk again soon. Bye-bye.